Can Illinois legislators handle the truth? And can they and the governor fix the fiscal mess? We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. It's been a busy week in state government for sure, with the governor giving his budget address, and we'll be talking about that with a couple of guys who know a lot about this, thankfully. Chris Wetterich is here, Statehouse reporter for the State Journal-Register, and one of the guys I really count on to put stuff in my newspaper. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Bernie.
The detail work. And Benjamin Yount is here, the bureau chief, Illinois Statehouse News, sending out all kinds of media to all kinds of media across the state.
Someone somewhere is reading it because I still get a paper.
Okay, let me hold up a newspaper headline here, which actually was the day of the speech, based on in the new day of what's happening with Twitter and everything else. There used to be a budget briefing that reporters would get the day before the speech would come out from the governor's people, and you'd find out what was in it, and they'd say, don't print anything until noon the next day when the speech starts. That doesn't work anymore. It has progressed to a point where it's now all on the record this year because everybody's tweeting constantly anyway and telling people what's going on, and news has leaked for years even before some of the social media came about. Anyway, Quinn, close facilities, cut jobs. That was the basic idea of what the speech was about, that this is an austere time, and the governor said, using that movie line from A Few Good Men or something like it, you know, I think you can handle the truth, legislators, but the truth is bad, which is perhaps why he gave a speech for 30 minutes and there was no applause whatsoever. Chris, give a little roundup of where we are and if the governor was effective in presenting a message this time.
I'm not sure the legislators can handle the truth. We'll see. I mean, you know, the speech was almost about two things. It was almost entirely about two things, which was Medicaid, the state's mounting Medicaid debt, and the state's mounting pension debt. We're $85 billion in debt to the pensions. Where are we on unpaid bills for Medicaid?
We're at 6.8 currently. Yeah. It's going to be 8.5 by June.
Yeah. Is that only Medicaid or like all?
6.8 was Judy Bartopinka's Thursday morning
unpaid bills
on her
today.
desk,
right.
Unpaid bills.
So that's kind of the cash.
Much of them are Medicaid.
Unbalanced, right.
Right. So his speech was entirely about the fact that we have to rein in costs on both of those. What he didn't do is give any details about what he would have the legislature do to do that. He's decided against doing that because he wants a collaborative process, is kind of the way he described it. He wants to sit down, and he's got two different working groups for each of these issues. He wants to sit down with the lawmakers that are there and also the interest groups that have stakes in these two issues and hammer out a way to fix it. And by not offering any details, he was criticized. But I guess I think that was a good decision, because in the past, every time he's given a budget speech, it has promptly been put in the shredder within 5 minutes of him finishing.
Even if he would have come out and said, this is how we're going to do it. Tomorrow we'll have this meeting, next week, next month, and walk a timeline back, he would have been ripped to shreds for that. Pat Quinn had to deliver a very bad message. He did it quickly. That's the best part about this.
30-minute speech.
The only one that I saw was shorter was when Rod Blagojevich came and blew through a PowerPoint presentation in 23 minutes. It was
hey, the less time from him,
short.
the best. Right.
Well, it was, and it's telling, though, when you actually look at the budget proposal, that the governor is basing his FY13 spending plan, $33.9 billion overall, on the assumption that he's going to get a $2.7 billion Medicaid cut. Nothing in his spending plan is predicated on savings from pensions. I think that sets the tone, and that directs the focus, whether intentional or not. Lawmakers are taking the prospect of a $2.7 billion Medicaid cut far more seriously than they are any potential savings out of the pension system. One, because we have such a large pension overall liability, $83 billion that we just
into the future.
Underfunded.
Yes.
So any savings, there's going to be a push to plow that back into the system. But it is Medicaid that is really going to drive this. The governor wants to spend the same $14 billion in the next budget that we're spending in the current budget on Medicaid, and as anyone who's ever taken a look at this for more than 5 minutes knows, those costs go up 8, 10, 12, sometimes even 20%.
Which means what
per
he
year.
wants in cuts is either pay doctors and hospitals less and restrict eligibility.
And
perhaps all kids now covers all kinds of kids with families that make a
300%
reasonable
of the
living,
poverty level,
and perhaps reining that in. But that's a tough thing to do.
That's what he didn't say during the speech, and the speech is for everyone else. The briefing is for you and I, where we get to sit and ask these questions. And even when we asked, they're not saying how much of a rate cut the governor is asking for. Last year, he wanted a 6% cut to save about $550 million. I'm bad at math. I was a communications major, but even my math, to get to $2.7 billion, that's a 24% rate cut to Illinois hospitals. Illinois Hospital Association's Danny Chun was in my office the day of the speech saying, hey, if we have to take a 24% cut, you're going to see hospitals close. 1 in 3, 70 out of the 200 hospitals in the state right now are losing money. They're going to see a Medicare cut. If they have to swallow a Medicaid cut that big, you could see some places in small communities that are not safety net hospitals just close the doors or raise the price for everything else. So it's a serious thing.
Yeah, the size of the Medicaid program is just kind of surprising. I mean, I think the governor said in the speech that I think it's a half, or just over a half, of all babies born in Illinois are being paid for by Medicaid.
That's a great, and that's an important point.
I saw the governor, big program.
I saw on Wednesday the governor used the same statistics we have been hearing from Republicans for 3 to 5, 7, 10 years.
1 in 5 people in the state is on Medicaid. Half of all babies, 1 in 3 children in the state is on Medicaid, and 1 out of every 2 that was born last year was born on Medicaid.
Okay. Let me get to something kind of general before we get into some more specifics, but what about the idea of leadership? And I think Tom Cross, the House Republican leader, said this: Governor, you should tell us what you want. Now, I know, Ben, you had alluded to this before. If the governor gives a specific plan, then you have legislators saying, dead on arrival, we're not going to do that. But is it not the role of the governor to lead and not just to say, okay, working group, I think it was, is it the pension one that's supposed to come back with the report by April 17th? Mm-hmm. And then there's the Medicaid one. There's one that he set a date for and one that he didn't, and April 17th is one. And the legislative session is supposed to end the end of May, and the new fiscal year that we're talking about, that they have to pass the budget for, begins July 1. So should he not lead, or is this, I think, Chris, you've already said this is probably as good a way as any, but you can't really win.
I think he did lead. I mean, because his people are the ones running these task forces, he's not leaving it to the legislature to do what it wants to do, which is what has been the pattern the last couple of years. It's the problem they had with gaming last year was the legislature came up with its own gambling expansion bill. The governor did not participate. He did not insert himself until too late, and so consequently they passed a gambling bill that was unacceptable to him. So this year he's at the table supposedly from the start, and if he does that, I think that people can probably lay off him on the leadership question.
And that's the process. I talked with Will Davis, who is the education appropriation chair for elementary and high schools in the House. Mm-hmm. Not Crestmont, I can't remember where he's from. Hazelcrest, somewhere up there. And he said that exact same thing, that you had an issue last year where the governor would issue edicts or talk in grand terms, but not engage lawmakers as they crafted the budget. If the governor wants to lead on Medicaid, if he wants to lead on pensions, he needs to be in these meetings, and not just the public meetings, but the behind-the-scene meetings that are going to happen, all the way through till about mid-May, which is when everything really starts. And he needs to tell lawmakers, be very clear, this is what I will support, this is what I will not support. We saw this with the regional offices of education, we saw this with gaming. That's Pat Quinn's leadership style, that he's vague, and at the last minute he says, I'm sorry, I can't deal with this, and you've missed that opportunity.
Okay, one of the key questions, certainly in and around Springfield, is if you're going to reform pensions, which means save money on how much money is going into that system each year, which, by the way, the governor's people made a big deal of the fact in the briefing, and I think also in the speech, the governor himself, that just in 2008, the state had to give like $1.7 billion to the pension systems to make that year's contribution. This year it's more than $5 billion. So it's like 3 times as high as it was, and that is eating up all of the new revenue that any economic activity in the state is bringing in. But in order to cut back on what is paid out in the pension plan and what has to be put into it, is the governor ready to go in the direction that says current state employees could have their pension plans altered from this day forward, which the Senate President, John Cullerton, has already said he believes is unconstitutional?
Yes, but there's a caveat. They have to agree to it. They will have to be at the table, and they will have to...
They meaning the legislators?
No, I mean they meaning the public employees.
Ah, okay.
They will have to consent, basically, and they will have to get something for that. And
you can bargain that. The state can't say, this happens, you have no say, as part of the negotiation and the contract with AFSCME, which is the biggest public employee is going on now.
Would they be willing to do that? I mean,
if they get something, and I think what they could get from the legislature and the governor is a more concrete guarantee that the legislature will put the money in the pensions going forward, that it will come right off the top like a bond payment has to under state law. There's already a state law that allows the pension payment, or that requires the pension pay. It's called a ongoing appropriation. So they would have to strengthen that even more than it already is in statute in order for that to happen. So I think with AFSCME at the table, I think they could extract some concessions from them if they give something back.
Okay. I'm sure they'll be wary though, because state employees in the past have made some concessions, for future, we won't take a raise now, and then if things are taken away later, they
don't forget their wages are on the table now because they are negotiating a new contract for the next fiscal year. I mean,
so
the governor
in the next several weeks.
And the governor and the legislature. I mean, I don't know about the governor, but the legislature has indicated that they don't want public employees getting raises. They don't want state employees getting any raises. They don't want to fund it, and they don't want to do it. So they already have. I mean, it's not like AFSCME has all the power here.
Well, the Speaker had an amendment last year that would require, that would essentially bar what the deal AFSCME struck with Governor Quinn before his re-election bid, the no layoffs, no closures guarantee. I know a lot of state workers. I know a lot of people who work in Human Services, Department of Health Care and Family Services, and yeah, it would be a nervous time to have to renegotiate a contract in this political climate. I think one more thing on the constitutionality of the pension question. President Cullerton is really the only of the legislative leaders to take a firm stand. I was watching some comments from the Speaker on another public television show for Southern Illinois, and he posed the question back to the interviewer that, and Mike Madigan helped write the 1970 Constitution, where is the constitutional guarantee? Is it that everything earned up until today is guaranteed, but tomorrow going forward? So I really
Which is a difference from Senate President Cullerton.
Absolutely.
Cullerton says it's a benefit, it's a benefit, it's a benefit, you can't take it away. There's some wiggle room.
And I think Illinois Lawmakers runs on many of these stations, by the way.
Fantastic.
One of the interesting permutations of the pension thing is that the governor and his staff, again, are saying, look at what the state pays, and a lot of what they pay is for school employees outside the city of Chicago. So all of downstate school employees, when they get their pensions, they're based on the salary that the local school district gives them, but the pension is all paid by the state, and that's where I guess even a majority of all state pension contribution funds are going into the teachers' retirement system, which pays for those non-Chicago teachers all over the state. And the governor is basically pushing to have local school districts pick up this cost. I know in the Springfield District 186 school district that they've calculated that would be something like $7 million a year just here. But statewide, obviously we have almost 900 school districts that would save billions to the state. On the other hand, the governor in the speech talked about school construction and how he wants to build or fix schools all over the state, and he went on for like a minute naming different towns and cities all over Illinois where you would get this benefit. But any chance in this election year that the legislature would move to shift those pension costs to the local districts versus having the state pick it up?
I think it's possible to shift a portion of them. I don't think that they can shift the whole thing. I think that's kind of been a warning shot from Quinn and Cullerton and Madigan, kind of across the bow. And I think that I think that's probably an element of whatever ends up being the final plan, because that's what that's the Democratic idea. If the Democrats had their way, they would shift all of that off the state's books.
I don't think it's just the Democrats. I think the Republicans would do it, but I think they want to do it for different reasons. I think that the Speaker and the Senate President may see this as the easiest of the financial solutions to shift the pension burden. I know that there are a number of Republican lawmakers I've talked to who wouldn't mind, as a policy shift, having local taxpayers have to see exactly what a teacher pension costs and force that economic reality upon school districts. Right now, Springfield schools can negotiate whatever they want for a pension, but
I don't
those people don't have. I think that and this is because I read a lot of stuff out of Wisconsin. There are some people who take a look at the way Wisconsin is approaching, for lack of a better word, the influence that public employee unions exert over local budgets. And I think that this is a policy issue that some Republicans maybe fiscally it's instant.
So you think we want to have what Wisconsin had and have like a couple of months of people sleeping in our rotunda?
No. I certainly don't want that. But I think that when you say
Bernie.
This is, it's not just Democrats who want this. I think Republicans are looking to shift these costs. And there are some that are saying this could be a policy change, not just a fiscal solution.
There may be a few, but I think that a suburban Republican who has a wealthy, property-rich school district,
which gets almost no state
which
funding
gets almost
right now,
no state funding right now.
Property taxes make up so
right.
much of it.
The one you think of immediately is New Trier, and the Senate president talked about, well, they're paying gym teachers $150,000 in New Trier. That's who's going to get, screwed here, not downstate districts who don't pay their teachers quite as much. I think the suburban Republicans would be very leery of doing of a major shift. Maybe they could shift a few dollars to those types of
I mean, my basic question in any change like this is the politics of it become difficult because all these legislators represent a district. All the districts have school officials, and if you even, the number of school districts, several school districts in really each legislator's district, and they're all going to say don't do it. So it's a very hard vote.
Perhaps we should say this is more of it's a geographical issue, not a partisan issue so much. But unfortunately, increasingly, geographics is politics in this state. I think everybody in Chicago is fine with this idea of shifting because it won't affect Chicago school district.
Because Chicago schools already
they already pay their own. They already pay
their own pension contributions.
Absolutely.
Obviously, a big part of the governor's plan that remains controversial, and maybe we haven't talked about it yet in the show because it's been done now. This is like the third time in a few years that the governor is saying we're going to close facilities. Right. However, it's more this time. It's like 59 offices or facilities. It's like 14, significantly sized facilities, including two prisons in Dwight, the women's prison, and those inmates would move to, is it Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln? One of the ones in Lincoln.
Logan and Lincoln kind of will take some of the excess inmates.
And then TAMS, which is only 10 or 15 years old. It's the for maximum security prison in southern Illinois. That would be closed. Those inmates would, I believe, be moved to Pontiac, and that would make certain groups like the John Howard Association, which does prison reform, happy because they say that there are very brutal conditions there, 23 hours in solitary confinement, that kind of thing. And the cost per inmate there is like $60,000 a year versus something like $30,000 in one of the other prisons.
I think it's going to be a tough sell to close down TAMS. Half of the inmates at TAMS right now, and there are 400 something at TAMS, so close to 200 of those inmates earned a spot in TAMS by not being able to behave themselves in places like Pontiac. There are, in addition to closing those two facilities, the governor's proposing over 900 job cuts within the Department of Corrections. Not everyone would eventually be laid off. Some may be able to transfer and fill other open spots. But you don't have to wait for the email from AFSCME to say we're going to move very, very dangerous prisoners back into Pontiac at the same time we're cutting the number of staff to watch over these people. Southern Illinois Democrats who are taking a look at a governor that I don't know if they can run on his platforms, I don't see how they support that. I asked that question to Gary Forby. Very few Democrats in Southern Illinois turned out for this governor a couple of years ago. Now that he is proposing to close TAMS, the Juvenile Justice Center in Murfreesboro, the Department of Agriculture lab in Centralia, the State Police Forensic Crime Lab in Carbondale, where is that support going to come from?
And Gary Forby is from
Benton, far southern Illinois.
And in the state Senate, right?
It all comes down to, do you really think that this is going to happen, or is this another threat?
They are hot at him. They are mad. I heard Brandon Phelps on the phone in the hallway the other day.
Another legislator from
who's from far southern Illinois. Yeah, his face is often red, but it was particularly red this day on Wednesday. I'm not sure how they. I'm not sure the legislature can ultimately stop him though, because the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability doesn't have the power to veto these facility closings.
Yeah, they have to have hearings.
They have to have hearings.
Closures,
they have to.
Right, and this is made up of legislators.
There's a big process that has to occur, and most of these closings aren't happening until the end of the fiscal year in 2013.
And I know you even asked the question, Chris, in the briefing. All of these closures would end up being about $100 million. Is it worth all of the pain to all these communities?
It's less than $100 million. It's less than $10 million a facility. I was kind of rebuked for that, saying, well, that's $100 million this year, but then you add it up in subsequent years, where so you can easily say it's $1 billion in 10 years. So I think they have a kind of a point there. But
just one local interest, Jacksonville Developmental Center, which is going through its I'm just wondering if we think that will actually close, because it's not only a fiscal question there, but with a developmentally disabled center, the advocates in that field of care are very much for moving folks out of institutions and into community-based settings.
Right.
The governor says there will be that benefit plus a cost savings. Is that real, and will that make that more likely to happen this time around?
I think that you can take a look at some of the facilities that are on the list, and Jacksonville, Tinley Park, Singer. There are a handful of, as the governor has called them, institutions that will very likely be closed. I think there is still a question mark over TAMS. I think Murfreesboro, the writing may be on the wall. This is the second time within the past couple of months that it has been targeted for closure. Some of the facilities that the governor has targeted will certainly close. And the consolidations, the state police radio communication centers, the crime lab, the DHS offices, the DCF, that happens. That's a signature of the pen, and that happens. There's no input from anybody. I wrote a story with Gary Forby almost jumping up and down about the closure of TAMS. I still don't know if that happens, but there are a number of facilities, and Jacksonville being one of them, that will not be open.
One of the other things that the administration says they want to do is possibly close historic sites, including the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, 2 days a week in slow periods of time. Chris, do you think that will happen? Because obviously Springfield now is getting used to this flow of tourists or buses, at least on many days, but I guess Sundays and Mondays are their slower days, so we could again see a cutback in some of those hours and days, and is that likely to occur?
When I asked the governor's chief of staff about that on Tuesday, I think it was, he kind of just downplayed that. I mean, I don't know if you remember that or not, but he said, well, we'll work, we'll do our best. I mean, there are times of the year where it's very slow there, and the winter day, although we're coming out of winter, and almost not having had winter, but I think that's, again, something he can do with a stroke of a pen. He doesn't need anybody's approval to do it.
Okay, so. One thing that I remember when Governor Quinn took over for Governor Blagojevich in the horrible Blagojevich years was he went to the Dana Thomas House, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright restored house owned by the state and opened as a museum in Springfield. It had been closed by Governor Blagojevich, and Governor Quinn was there to open it and say it's open to the public, and might have even opened it like all week at the time. So,
it sounds to me though that he's talking about
only certain
reducing
days.
hours,
Yeah, but
not close. I mean, Blagojevich closed the thing completely.
That's right.
It is telling that in Illinois, in Springfield, Illinois, where Lincoln is ours and we love him more than anyone else, that the state is so broke we have to say, no, you can't come to the crown jewel of Abraham Lincoln's life because we need to save a couple of bucks. Okay. The PR battle on that he's going to lose.
Okay, I don't want to just make it sound like I'm doing this for ratings for this fine public TV show, but there is a proposal out there by Senator Troy Hutchinson to charge $5 tax for each person entering a strip joint if they serve alcohol, which would then pay costs of sexual assault or anti-sexual assault programs. So they have various names for this. We don't know if it's going to go very far in the legislature. Sheila Simon, the lieutenant governor, had a press conference in Chicago saying she is for this. I don't think they did it in front of one of those joints. I'm not sure. I think it was at a state building. And your thoughts, gentlemen, on if this revenue stream is likely to occur?
It's a great way to get your name in the paper. and the state taxes all kinds of products. They tax liquor to pay for roads. I mean, I don't think there's anything really inconsistent here, with what they're trying to do. But this is the time of the year at the legislature where you introduce these flashy bills and you get your name in the paper and on TV. And this was a particularly good way to do it. I don't know that it's all that important or all that.
Well,
it's going to raise all that much money.
If you're trying to make sure you have a funding stream for anti-sexual assault programs, it would be important. But it's just defensive if it happens.
I understand.
This is, I think, Chris, you're right. This was a great way in an election year to make sure that your name, that someone can put an idea behind the name they see on the ballot. It may pass. Who knows? We've passed some strange legislation here. I remember a debate on the Senate floor about whether or not Pluto should be a planet. So if we have time in the upper chamber for that, I think we have time for a strip club tax.
Well, the Tully monster is the state fossil. I remember the argument on that.
Interestingly enough, on that, one of the most influential lobbyists in Springfield is on the side of the. Is it the strip clubs or the stripper? I'm taking Al Ronan?
The industry, Al Ronan, former legislator himself.
Right.
Always gets the high dollar events.
Yes.
We have not much time, but we should perhaps remind people that March 20th is an Illinois primary. Illinois still could be in play in the Republican nomination for president, as the Republican field for president is still seems not set. And I'm just wondering, I haven't really seen a barrage of ads in Illinois. It's like the under the radar election, unless you're watching cable networks or the nightly national news. So any ideas?
It'll be surprising. I mean, if it's the Republican fight seems to have been like a road show. They drop in and the only person who has any money is Mitt Romney. So he's probably got a secret organization we don't even know about.
Yeah, well,
Dan Rutherford is
not so secret.
I talked to him. I was in Iowa on caucus night there, and Rutherford at that point said, "Hey, this could last till March 20th. Right. Illinois could play a role, and because Florida jumped ahead in the Republican national circles, Illinois actually could play a role at the convention if everything isn't." But that's a lot of ifs.
Right. And I will mention that Mark
August.
Kirk, our senator, who is on the mend from his stroke, was also in the Mitt Romney camp. So that seems to be where a lot of people in Illinois are, but we'll see how it goes because you never know the way these things are. With that, I think we're out of time, but I'd like to thank Chris Wetterich and Benjamin Yount for helping me discuss these things, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.